Yes, people. Monday night, it's 10 o'clock, so we know what time it is. It's Liverpool Football Club, Grounded Football and First XI. Got a good panel with me tonight. It's a special show tonight. It's 6 years since Jurgen Klopp became the Reds manager, so it's absolutely an appropriate time to spend the evening talking about the boss. So, onto the panel. First time on the show tonight for Dan. Evening, Dan. How are you?
Yeah, mate. Thanks for inviting me on. I really appreciate it. But yeah, I'm good. International break is treating me poorly, as you can imagine. But other than that, mate, I'm all good.
Sound treat us all poorly, mate. It's an absolute disgrace in it. So, do you know what? It's like it hasn't happened for me. I haven't watched any of it. Didn't watch the Nations League final. Just no interest. So,
No.
let's get back to club football where it's all at. And Doug, you okay, mate? Doug, how's your move going? You getting there?
Yeah, good to be back. Good to be back. I tuned in last week and really enjoyed it. It move's going really well and hopefully moved in by Friday. So all's well, my friend, and I'm glad to be back.
Excellent. And then there's Rack. Not last and certainly not least. How you doing, Rack? How are you today? He's got a sound issue. He needs a sound engineers in there. Right, he'll be back in a second. Right, so as I said at the start of the conversation, tonight's show is about Jurgen Klopp, and rightly so. 6 years in charge. It's whether we can get all through this in an hour because there's a lot to talk about. We'll start at the start, and because I've not spoken to you about anything about this, Dan, I'm going to start with you, pal. So the season starts. Suarez has gone. What's his name? Markovic has come in for about 900 million quid and not done a thing. I felt sorry for that bloke, right? Because he was bought to play in the spaces that Suarez would create. So because he was a good ball carrier, a good traveller, and he was quite quick. As soon as Suarez went, our tactics for Markovic went out the window. So I have some sympathy for the guy. How can you get sent off for poking somebody in the eye when you're running away? That's another thing I can't get my head around. That's continental referees for you, though, isn't it? In a nutshell. So poor bloke. What did we sell him for? About 12 quid in the end, and box of frogs or something. So back to the season. We go to Everton. We get a 1-1 draw. I think it was. It was a lackluster 1-1 draw. I don't think the plan was to let Brendan Rodgers go, but such was the performance on that day. I think the board made a decision at the end of the game. Can you remember where you were, Dan, and how you felt when the news came through? Were you watching it like me?
Yes, I was just watching it, mate, to be honest. Yeah, I was. And the writing was on the wall, wasn't it, for a few weeks, I felt. We were in a really poor run of form. And it was a confusing time to be a Liverpool fan in many ways. You mentioned the likes of Markovic and some of the signings we'd made around those months and years. Obviously, from the high of getting so close under Rodgers, I think he wasn't the manager to take us again, was he? That was the problem. I think he took us as far as he could. And I felt like we probably should have won the league that year under him. But he couldn't pick us up again. And that was pretty evident early on in the season, wasn't it? Because we were languishing mid-table, like you say. I don't think we'd won a game. Maybe one game, like the last 9 or something when he went. Something ridiculous. So, yeah, no surprise. But I'm pretty sure I was just at home watching it. And like I say, didn't shock me in the slightest.
No. Rack, just coming to you on this subject, was the board's decision to make Brendan Rodgers part company with Colin Pascoe the man in shorts? That's what he's known as, isn't he? Was that something? Was that telling? Was that a little bit of an indication as to that they didn't wholly trust Rodgers and that they thought this may not work?
Yeah, look, I mean, it's a funny one, isn't it? Because when some of you, if you're the manager and some of your trusted lieutenants are being shown the door by the club and not by you, then it kind of says to some extent the writing's on the wall, as Dan said. And I don't know if it was necessarily the Everton performance, because I heard some rumours. You never know with some of these ITKs, but there's one guy in particular who I think doesn't really talk very much, but he mentioned that Klopp is going to be our preferred thing. I think it came out that FSG, or it came out that regardless of the result against Everton, Brendan was going to be showing the door. And yeah, look, when you're forcing a manager to accept backroom staff that he may or may not want, Pep Linders, I think, was one of them who was kind of promoted to that in that capacity as well, if I remember correctly. But yeah, that doesn't really bode well. So yeah. it was going to happen sooner or later.
As an aside, Doug, I've got a comment here. I don't really want to ignore it because these guys work hard in the comments for us. I just want you to touch base on that very quickly. It's going off on a bit of a tangent, but it has sort of made Twitter in the last couple of days. Is that a sensible move for both Ox and Arsenal?
Yeah, I think. But I mean, they always say never go back for a second time to the club. Obviously, you were at. I think it'd be a good move for Arsenal. It's more squad depth for them. I think it makes sense. I think he's quite close to. He'll be very, very close at home as well with his family. So it does make perfect sense, I think.
So back to the topic in hand. Your thoughts on the sacking of Brendan Rodgers, and your thoughts on the names that were being bandied around, because Carlo Ancelotti, I mean, I've got it on quite good authority that Carlo Ancelotti actually had a conversation with FSG, and the reason why they didn't progress with that is because he wanted to buy a spine straight away. He wanted a goalkeeper, a centre-back, a centre midfielder and a forward. So basically, he'd identified the areas that we all knew were poor, or weak, shall I say, and FSG, surprise, surprise, didn't want to give him the money. So your thoughts on what you were thinking when Rodgers went, because it was the right decision at the time for the club. I thought it was. Did you?
Yeah, I was actually surprised he was still at the club at the start of the season. I mean, after the 6-1 defeat against Stoke, I thought he was going to be gone after that game. So for him to get another transfer window, and to be fair, he was actually backed pretty well in that transfer window. I think it was like 1 win out of 7 after that. I think we beat Stoke. I think we beat Bournemouth, and then we went on a run. I think it was 1 win out of 7. So it wasn't great. It wasn't a great wee run. I wasn't surprised he was sacked. I think they did make the right decision in getting rid of him. And basically, like, I think it was Jamie Carragher that said that the favourite will be Klopp. And I was on board with it immediately. So they went out, they got their man, and I actually remember where I was when actually he was announced. I was actually at work, and I came through on my break and let out a little bit of a scream that it was Klopp that was being appointed. And one of my managers asked me if I was all right, and I said, "Oh yeah, I'm fine. Just that Jurgen Klopp's been named Liverpool manager." So that was something to remember him by. But yeah, I was not too surprised by Rodgers getting the boot, because I was surprised that he was actually still in charge, if I'm being honest with you.
I don't know if you guys remember. Do you remember on Sky Sports, there was a cheeky git outside Jurgen Klopp's home in Germany and pushed his doorbell and was like, "Are you coming to Germany?" I thought that was a bit cheeky, but then what was even more incredible was the fact that he confirmed that he was coming to the UK. He didn't necessarily say. I don't think he necessarily said Liverpool specifically, but it did make me chuckle that they just pushed his doorbell and asked him to confirm the job.
I think it was on the cards, wasn't it? Because I know I've read Melissa Reddy's book on sort of the time period, and she speaks about FSG meeting with Klopp in New York and stuff like that. So there were already sort of rumblings that it might happen. But obviously the famous one when he did get sacked was Thierry Henry and Jamie Carragher, wasn't it, in the Sky Sports studio?
Touching with the knee.
Yeah, that was the moment.
Yeah, I mean, Rack, your thoughts on had we gone with Ancelotti? Obviously, we saw what happened at Everton, where he rolled out the red carpet and big money for James Rodriguez, which was bizarre, because there's never a more player less likely to succeed in the Premier League than him because of the lack of work ethic. We know his quality, but he's the slowest centre attacking midfielder I've ever seen. So are you pleased that we kind of swerved the opportunity to look at Ancelotti? Because it's come to pass since we took Klopp on. That was quite a detailed conversation. So are you glad we missed Mr. Ancelotti out?
I mean, obviously, in retrospect, it's quite clear that there was only one man for Liverpool, and that was Jurgen. But look, there were people that were supportive of Ancelotti getting the job, and there was a school of thought behind it as well. But I think one of the things they did do is they apparently did a lot of research into these guys behind the scenes, spoke to a lot of people. I think if I remember reading correctly, they actually were spying on Ancelotti in a hotel somewhere, like in the hotel, just to kind of see how he was conducting himself in public and stuff. And but Ancelotti's, you can't knock his CV, but I think with the way that the club wanted to go with a director of football model, which is what actually they wanted to do with Brendan, and Brendan originally rejected the job because he didn't want to work with a director of football, and then FSG caved to that demand, which obviously they should never have done. The fact that Jurgen was familiar with working with a director of football model at Dortmund meant that he was the outstanding choice in a footballing sense, but obviously since then he's proved just as a man and just as the way he's conducted himself and the way that he's ingratiated himself with the fans and the club and the culture. There's only one man.
So I'll come to each of you in turn now. I just want to find out why you felt and feel still that Jurgen Klopp was the right man for Liverpool. So I'll come to you, Dan. Obviously, when he's recruited and he strolls into the press room in a black suit, looking really chilled, relaxed, like he's been on holiday. What was the thing that resonated with you about why Jurgen Klopp was right for Liverpool?
His personality, to be honest with you, and it's easy to say with 6 years of hindsight, but there's almost something in me that felt from almost the word go, because he'd not been at the most glamorous clubs. If anything, he'd been at the opposite. And it felt like at the time, we weren't necessarily the most glamorous fit because we hadn't won the Premier League for God knows, 20 odd years at the time. And it just felt like we needed someone to really inspire us and someone who really gets us. That's a big thing with Liverpool, like, bringing the fans into play and bringing the city into play. And that's something he'd done previously at Mainz and Dortmund. So it just felt from the get-go that we had someone who was going to fully embrace the entire club and take all of us with him, if that made sense. And that's kind of what he said. So he really endeared himself to fans immediately. And straight away, I think we all got a sense of, here we go. Like, this fella gets this club. And obviously, as it's panned out, he really did.
Yeah, he did. Doug, what is it with Jurgen Klopp and the fans? What have you seen in the tenure with Liverpool, also with Dortmund, and obviously with Mainz? What is it about him that makes his connection with the fans what it is?
I think it's just his all-round personality. Him coming out very well in press conferences, and I thought he was the right fit because of, like, Dortmund and Liverpool have got, like, obviously Dortmund have got the yellow wall. We've got the Kop.
Yeah.
I thought it was a very, very good fit for both him and Liverpool. And he's got such an aura with the fans as well. Like, he's like another Bill Shankly almost. The way that he conducts himself with the fans. So I thought it was a very, very good fit for both him and Liverpool.
Rack, Doug touches on it there, and it's really, really key point. What are the similarities between Klopp and previous managers? Why is he such a
previous manager?
Yeah, why is he such a
okay.
fit?
Sorry, I'm not Roy Hodgson you're talking about there, I assume.
We're not too big for a relegation battle tonight, mate. All right, let's not do this.
Look, it's difficult. It's difficult for me to say and make comparisons with Shankly because I wasn't alive when he was basically reforming the club in his own image and what he wanted to see. But I've read about it and what I've learned about it over the years. Jurgen Klopp, I think Doug said it almost perfectly, that he is a modern day Shankly. He's a man that will is so inspiring that people will follow him. People will do what he says because of the way he says it, the man that he is, and he was just a perfect fit, and like all the soft skills and the soft reasons why he was such a good fit in terms of his personality. And then also when you're looking at it from a footballing perspective, he's worked with limited budgets, or not, maybe not limited budgets, but he's worked within certain constraints. He's always worked with a director of football. One of the great things about Klopp, which Brendan actually wasn't, he doesn't mind giving power away to other people. So, for example, the idea that Michael Edwards became the director of football was absolutely fine. Whereas Brendan wanted absolute control. He wanted to have a say in who the signings were and who was coming in. And ultimately, that's one of the reasons why it didn't work, because we had the what's it called, the transfer committee buying some players, and you had Brendan Rodgers buying other players. Like Benteke was a Brendan signing, but he was never a Liverpool signing. Like, what system could Benteke possibly play for us at that time? It was just bizarre. It didn't even really mesh well with what you think of as a Brendan team. So it was just a bit all over the place. Yeah, so it's he ticks so many boxes.
Doug, is it fair to say because Jurgen Klopp's probably the least egotistical person you'll ever see in your world, that's the reason why he succeeded where Brendan Rodgers didn't? Because I personally thought the biggest thing that Brendan Rodgers brought to Liverpool Football Club was his ego. Is it fair to say the difference in the two men has gone on to prove that this is why we are where we are?
I think Rag summed it perfectly. I think Rodgers wanted more control over transfers than the transfer committee did, and Klopp's kind of given Michael Edwards this list to go out and get players, and you know what? Some signings have worked, and some signings, I can't really recall Jurgen Klopp signing that's really failed. In all honesty, so Rodgers did buy a lot of duff. Players, has to be said. I mean, yeah, Benteke. I mean, there's been you could put Markovic, you could put Lambert. I mean, Klopp has signed so many players that you could just say have changed Liverpool for the better. You'd have to say.
Right, I'm going to ask you, think about this while I go through the next questions. I want to know from you, who's your favourite signing under Klopp and why, and who's not your favourite signing? I'm not going to say worst. Who do you think it hasn't worked out as well as maybe it should? And I'll get involved in this as well as being the host. Whilst you're thinking about that, the European Europa League final. Dan, your thoughts on that? Because that was our first real big final under Klopp. And there was a bit of a history that Klopp got to lots of finals and hadn't won. First half was very good. Second half was indifferent. Would be polite. So your thoughts on that and what bearing do you think? What in your mind were you thinking in terms of what bearing that will have on the club?
It always felt like that. Obviously, you mentioned sort of this final record, which obviously continued for a while with us when you take the League Cup into account as well, and then obviously the Champions League that followed. But it felt like we were on a journey at that point with Klopp, and it never felt like that was our destination. Listen, it would have been incredible to win that Europa League, and I'd have bit your hand off for it at the time, obviously. But when you look back and reflect on it now, we were getting pelters from different fan bases at the time for not winning it and not winning so-and-so, and Klopp was a nearly man. But people forget what he'd already done in Germany, by the way, in terms of winning trophies and overcoming Bayern Munich to do so. People forget that really easily. But for me, like I say, it just felt like we were a team learning to be that elite team, and we weren't quite there yet. And you mentioned sort of the differentiation in halves. That was something we were doing a hell of a lot. Like, he brought in his heavy metal brand of football, and at times it was incredible. But at times, don't you just wish we had the control that we sometimes have at games now? And he hadn't quite implemented that yet. Like, we were either full throttle, and it was amazing, or we were full throttle and we were terrible. Like, I remember a different game. I remember watching us against Bournemouth at home, and Bournemouth away for that matter. We're flying, we can't lose the game. And you think about the Norwich game as well. I know I'm throwing all sorts out there, but those are games we were in full control of, and all of a sudden we just capitulate. And that was similar to what we did in that Europa League final. And that's where we were as a side. We were moulding into something special. And I think we all knew that, but it wasn't quite there yet. And to be fair to him, just to finish on the point, he took what was a pretty average, with some class, squad to that final. And it was nowhere near sort of ready to go and win anything yet. And that's how it proved. For me, we got there because of Klopp's genius, certainly in European competitions, instead of the squad being good enough.
Yeah, Ryan Fraser, there's a name, eh? Sits on the bench at Newcastle, or has he gone from there now? Promised the world, didn't he, in that season when he scored all those goals and terrorised Liverpool's defence.
We were linked with him on the back of that.
I'm so glad we didn't get him. I'm so glad we didn't even dip our toes in the water as a free last summer, mate, because that really wouldn't be great. Rack, the game against Spurs in London when Dejan Lovren had a total brain fart more than once and we got absolutely battered. That's often called out as the pivotal moment in Klopp's reign where we genuinely turned a corner. Is that how you see it?
I think it's a bit overblown, to be honest. I think that was definitely a terrible result. And we already had the makings of a decent team, but really it was when Virgil came in, because there were times when we still looked a bit shaky at the back, and I don't think that necessarily fundamentally changed after the Spurs game too much. Like, it may change in terms of results, but I don't really remember thinking. It's a bit of a feeling because I need to go back and look at the results because some of it is looking with hindsight, but I don't remember feeling much more secure about our defence until Virgil came in, and then all of a sudden we just looked so much more accomplished. And just quickly following on from what Dan said, I actually think losing that Europa League final was probably the best thing that ever happened to us. Because it meant the following season we didn't have European football, and we could get champion, and we could focus on just getting Champions League football. And I think that was probably part of the development that we needed to do as a team, as he said. So, yeah.
Good answer, Doug. We often get ridiculed for the way that the players approach the fans in the draw with West Brom, all linking hands, walking into the 6-yard box. And when I saw that, I remember he did that with Dortmund when they were about to disappear down the trapdoor out of the top league in the Bundesliga. What were your thoughts on that at the time? Could you see what he was trying to do? And looking back on it in hindsight, was it a bit of a masterstroke?
I watched a lot of Bundesliga, and I remember that moment where they almost went out of the Bundesliga. It was going around shockwaves almost that a team like Borussia Dortmund were going to get relegated. I actually understood the logic of what he actually was meaning to do. West Brom, yes, it was a bad result. It was a 2-2 draw, but at least we got a point out of that. But I understood what he was bringing through. Just almost to just applaud the fans, and yes, I know it came out as a bit ridiculous, but you can understand that he obviously did that in Germany. He was going to do it at some point as well, and that game, the West Brom game, I think is a big turning point.
Yeah, I saw that as a way to say to the fans, look, we've just drawn with West Brom, and you're not really very happy about that, but we are united with you in what we're what we're setting on our path, what we're trying to do. I watched the Champions League against Spurs with a guy that's very good friends with John Achterberg. And he told me that when Klopp joined the club, he got everybody together in sort of a meeting room. And I mean, everybody in the club, whether they be cleaners, first 11 or whatever, and said, right, we're about to embark on a journey. I don't care if you mop the floor or you put the ball in the back of the net. You are all equally as important, and don't ever forget that. And if any of you don't want to be a part of that journey, then please go and get in your cars and leave, because this is what we're going to do. Dan, how much of a Kloppism is that to hear that story? You've probably heard it before. I know I'm not the only person that's ever said it, but how much does that typify the man?
Yeah, massively. And just to finish up on the West Brom point, I was in the Kop that day, and looking back now, I felt like I might got carried away, given it was just a draw against West Brom. But it genuinely felt like a moment, because I know we came back into the game late and only managed a late equaliser ourselves to snatch it, but it did feel like you touched upon, like Klopp was saying, listen, we're all in this together. Let's go from here. And since it's developed into the fist bump in front of the Kop. So it just shows you how far we've come. But yeah, in terms of the getting everyone together, that does epitomise the man in many ways. Because like I touched upon earlier, he hasn't come from an elite football career and this all riches, all trophies. He's a hard-working football man. He obviously loves the sport. He clearly loves it. He clearly lives and breathes it. But he had to work hard to even get the decent career he managed. So he doesn't see it like a lot of other elite managers. He sees that everyone has to knuckle down. And he seems like just a genuine bloke. Like the type of guy, if he wasn't a football manager, would be just a nice guy to work alongside. So I think that's what makes him so unique, in that he will bring every single person in Melwood, as it was, and now Kirby, together and say, I don't care what you do. We're in this as a one and as a unit. And I think you can see that rubs off on the players when you see certain videos that come out of the club and stuff like that. And they all seem to rally round the whole unit, whether you're a player or not. And I think that is what's made this club so special over the past few years.
Good shout.
People always say that they want unity within the club, and especially with fans. Like, just going back to that thing about after the West Brom game, they want to see a bond between fans and the team. They feel like sometimes the team and players are living on a different planet to the average football fan. And yet, when Jurgen comes out and tries to forge that bond, all the like other fans or whatever, they're all like, "Oh yeah, you're just celebrating a 2-2 draw," or what's all this nonsense? But that's not everyone. Thing is, everybody knows what he was doing. They just use that as a stick to kind of beat us with a little bit, just because they think it's good banter, even though it's a bit dull now. What he was doing was he was establishing a bond between the team and the fans. And look where it's got us now. So I don't think anybody can really question it. And the same internally within the club, like the fact that everyone is singing from the same hymn sheet, everyone is moving in the same direction is important if you want to maximise your resources. So, yeah, absolutely right.
I think I've given up trying to second guess rival fan bases on Twitter, mate. The things they come out with and the things they say. I've heard that Emil Smith Rowe is going to be like one of the best players in the world. Came out over the weekend. That's just reactionary bollocks, mate. At the end of the day, we're not going to give it too much consideration, are we? Doug, is the fact that Jurgen Klopp is and his family are, and he always has been very working class. Do you think that makes it very easy for him to draw that line with the fans and make that synergy?
Oh yeah, I think he's got a connection with the fans, and I think he understands the city really well. He's just a breath of fresh air. I could listen to him talk about football for hours on end. He is that good a manager, and as Dan said, I think he is a genuine nice guy. So I think the fact that he's working class, I think he gets the city of Liverpool, and he gets what the city is about.
Because he said, hasn't he, when his career is over, he's going to move back to the Mainz region because that's where his family are.
Yeah.
He's not going to go and live in Hollywood. He's not going to go and do this. The only Hollywood thing about him is his teeth. He's obviously Bobby's been in his ear and got him down the dentist, hasn't he? So, that's probably the only Hollywood thing about Jurgen. He's very sort of grounded, as our program is grounded. Right. So it's favourite player and not so favourite signing time. So I'll start with you, Dan. We'll go with your not favourite side, the one you think struggled a little bit.
I'm really happy you came to me first because I was terrified someone was going to nick it. And I have got two in mind just in case. I reckon someone will go with a different one. But I'm going to go with Naby Keita. Promised so much. Still could deliver. It's a bit harsh on my account to call him out now, given he's still a Liverpool player and could well, thrive this season. But right at this moment, he hasn't delivered. And I know a lot of it's through injuries, and I know we've seen some flashes in the pan, but it just hasn't happened for him. And he was billed as this perfect Klopp player, and everything we've seen in Germany and in the Bundesliga, because obviously we signed him a year before he arrived, so it would give us a full year to watch him, and I couldn't wait. But whatever's happened in him coming from Germany to England, it just hasn't worked whatsoever so far in a Liverpool shirt. And I think that Real Madrid game, the first leg, pretty much epitomised his career.
Oh,
Was unfortunately.
Don't.
It was bad. It was, and I felt sorry for him because I wanted to do well. I wanted to do well so much. Obviously, he cost a lot of money, and I really would love him to do well, but it just hasn't worked.
Right, I've got a theory regards Naby Keita, and I'll share it with you boys, and then feel free to rip it to bits, right? But I'm going to share it with you anyway. In Germany, Naby Keita's job was to pick up the ball and drive at the opposition. Is that fair to say? And ask questions and commit people, and because he can see a pass, he's got great balance, 2 good feet. He can shift the ball and move it. In the season when we won the league, I think Liverpool made use of VAR really cleverly in terms of pushing the back four right up to the halfway line and trusting that the guys in the broom cupboard would get the marginal decisions right. In doing that, they compressed all of the space where the likes of Naby Keita and Oxlade-Chamberlain want to work in. They want to pick the ball up and they want 15 yards of space in front of them. So what the point I'm trying to get to is, do we think the tactics that Klopp employed to take away the heavy metal football, become a little bit more controlled and ultimately win the league, did Naby suffer, not just from injuries, but because when he got the ball turned to face up, there's 6 or 7 bodies all around him? Is it possible he suffered from that?
I'd say so, yeah. I think that's probably a fair call because you're right. He does like open space to run into. And when we've seen him do it in the past, we've seen him leave people for dead. That moment against Crystal Palace springs to mind in particular when he left that fella running in the opposite direction. Right. But yeah, and I think that we've been victims of that in a few different cases, to be honest with you. I think Gini Wijnaldum split opinion in the Liverpool fan base more than anyone, I'd say. And I think there was a player in there dying to get out at times, but our system restricted what he could do a lot of the time as well, because you're watching for Holland and he's a different footballer altogether. And the same could be said for Naby Keita. I mean, that's harsh, but his role...
It is true.
But his, freedom is restricted, like Wijnaldum's was, because if he goes on a lung-busting run and takes on two and loses the ball, he knows Klopp's going to be fuming. So maybe our systems, our tactics, our sort of way about going about football recently hasn't helped him. But there's no getting away from the fact he might well be a flop, yeah.
Do you know what? That thing you talk about Palace, he did it against Bournemouth as well. You do not do those things on the edge of your box, which is what he's prone to doing, trying to nutmeg somebody or flick the ball around him and go in a different direction. It's lovely to watch, and the guy's got the balls to try it. But Klopp would be having a flipping kittens watching that, wouldn't he? Because I understand that the midfield area that we incorporate across that three, they call it the battle zone. And when they come out of that, that's what the backroom staff are telling, like Henderson, and we're telling them now to get back in the battle zone, because that's where they believe the game was won and lost, type of thing. So you make a good point, Dan, that is the lack of discipline in terms of not wanting to do that system, and it did sort of suppress Wijnaldum's creative flair to some degree. It's a good shout. So Rack, who's the one for you that you like more than anybody else?
I mean, it's one of Salah or Virgil, but I think I'm going to go with Virgil just because I feel like that was the final piece of the puzzle that made us into a world-class team. I think Fab and Alisson came afterwards that made us into a team that could win the biggest titles in the world, which we obviously then went on to do. But when Virgil signed, I think it totally changed the way that we could play the game. And even though the start of that season was brilliant, Phil was playing out of his skin. Mo had already started like a house on fire, and the front four were established at that point. I think Virgil coming in just took us to that next level, and obviously in that second half of the season we made the Champions League final. I'm still gutted we didn't win that, because we could have. And the way we started that final, we were all over Madrid, and Mo going off. I think we were still a little bit fragile at that point. But yeah, so yeah, it's going to be Virgil for me.
Doug, can I have one that you're not so keen on, one you think struggled a bit? Obviously, Naby Keita's off the table now, so go for another one.
I'm going to go Loris Karius. I understand that Klopp knows the Bundesliga well, but whenever I heard about Loris Karius, obviously me watching the Bundesliga, look, he's a very good goalkeeper. He's a very good goalkeeper from Mainz. He did very, very well for Mainz. But for me, he's never been a number one. And I didn't think he was that good to be our number one either. And he just gave me absolute nightmares whenever he was on the ball, and he was always prone to a mistake as well. I mean, I'll never forget the Real Madrid game where he basically passes it to Benzema's foot and it goes into the back of the net. And then obviously I think there was he couldn't do anything about the Bale overhead kick, but there was a shot. I think he palms into the net as well. Mm-hmm. So. Yeah. He just had those moments for me, and he was just never equipped to be a Liverpool number one.
It's funny you should say that, because I don't know how you palm a ball into your net when you stood 10 yards off your goal line. I don't get that. It makes no sense. It's like his hand was on sideways or something, wasn't it? You know what I mean? It makes no sense at all. I know, and the thing that Sergio Ramos did to him is borderline assault. You go to prison for that if you did that in the street. You just can't do that to people, but he's the ultimate shithouse, isn't he? So, and he did the same thing, trapping Salah's arm and dragging him down. He knows what he's doing, and he's a winner. And whilst on the day we hate it, it's what separates him from players who aren't winners. At the end of the day, he did what he needed to do. It's funny you should say that, because I saw a clip of them in the tunnel before the game, and the filthy looks Ronaldo was giving Salah. I don't know if you've seen it on Twitter. the filthy looks Ronaldo was giving Salah, because obviously he's the major threat.
Yeah.
So for me, I'm going to go with someone I think has made a big difference to Liverpool, and obviously I would have liked to have picked Virgil, but Rat jumped in there. I think Alisson has taken the confidence that Virgil's got and pushed it to a totally new level, because he's so quick off his line and he's so alert, and he's one-on-ones. Only Peter Schmeichel stands up against Alisson when it comes to saving one-on-ones. I think he's given Van Dijk even further license to push forward and fire those laser-guided balls into the channels, and also to allow us to play with the high back line. Could you imagine playing that high back line with Mignolet or Karius? You just couldn't do it, could you? Every
Mignolet,
time
oh
they
my
give
God.
Mignolet the ball, it's a guaranteed throw into the opposition, wasn't it? Straight in the first row of the stand.
Yeah, and to be honest with you, like I've got a list of the goalkeepers that we've had after Pepe Reina, and some of these are absolute shockers. Brad Jones, Donny,
Donny, yeah.
Mignolet, Danny Ward, Adam Bogdan, probably the worst of the lot, Karius, and then obviously we've got Alisson. So yeah, for me, he's just a very, very good goalkeeper and the best since we've had since Pepe Reina.
Yeah, I loved Pepe Reina, and for 2 years, Pepe Reina was amazing. And then he got involved in the politics of the club, demanding that Rafa Benitez came back, trying to engineer moves to Barcelona and things. And for the last 18 months, mate, he might as well have been Simon Mignolet,
Yeah, he
because he was throwing
struggled.
him in all
Yeah.
over the place, mate.
Yeah.
So I love Pepe. I'd like to see him back at the club in some format because of
Yeah.
the personality. We've all seen his initiation, La Vida Loca songs and all that, mate. The guy's just brilliant in the changing room. So he'd be a hell of a guy to go to a party with, wouldn't he? So yeah, for me, Alisson's just allowed the back four to have so much faith. And what is really interesting is last season when he had his own wobbles, and he did have 6 or 7 games where he looked anything but a world-class goalkeeper. And the wheels really came off for him in the City game when he was at fault for 2 of the goals. And he was, because he should have put those balls in the stand instead of trying to be cute with them. People say,
Yeah.
"Oh, he should have been passed back to there." Well, you pass it back to your goalkeeper because he can empty it if it needs to be done, not try and flip the ball over the top. He looked for me a man devoid of confidence, and I was worried about him coming into the season. But clearly, the people at the club have done what they needed to do psychologically to settle him down, and he just looks every bit the goalkeeper we thought we were getting when we signed him. So it would be Alisson has allowed the Van Dijk thing to go to a different level. So Dan, coming to you for your player that you really thought was a great signing for Liverpool.
For me, it's Andy Robertson. Just because, again, he sort of epitomises everything that we've done under Klopp, really. I know we've had sort of the big, and on that topic, Simicast, another left back. But yeah, I know we've had sort of the big name signings in Van Dijk and Alisson who've really transformed, and Salah. I know he wasn't a big name signing when we got him, but he's proved to be. But they were big money. I mean, we're looking at 8 million for Andy Robertson, and maybe not even that when you take into account Kevin Stewart going the other way. So that sort of bargain, wheeling and dealing is what we've done better than anyone in the world over the past few years. And another case of similar to Klopp, really, not had the easiest route into elite football, but has found himself there through hard work. Obviously, Queen's Park to Hull City to Liverpool is a rather bizarre route there, but God knows he found himself there, and he has been outstanding. And probably amongst, if you look at him, obviously Scotland captain now, he's a real leader in that Liverpool side. And I'd say he's one of the leaders, even though he's never really been captain. But listen, he's his nation's captain, and the way he goes about his business, you'd have to assume he was one of ours.
Absolutely, and I think the real acid test for him is I've done quite a lot of pods recently looking at sort of players of yesteryear versus now, sort of a tier list. And the conversation is the top 2 left backs Liverpool Football Club have ever had are Alan Kennedy and Andy Robertson. And that Andy Robertson's going down the route where he might surpass Alan Kennedy, which, Alan Kennedy scored 2 winning goals in the European Cup finals and was the first of the left backs that bombed on. He really did push forward and bomb on, didn't he? So that's a massive compliment to Andy Robertson. That's a really good shout, Dan. So Rack, the guy that didn't do it for you, fella, who's the guy that you think you look at it and you think, not sure about that one?
It's a funny one because this guy he came in and I wasn't entirely convinced, and then he came in. He started playing more regularly about halfway through the season, and I thought, damn, we've got a player here. And then he got injured. I'm talking about Ox now, um, and he put some performances against City especially. But there were a few good performances just at the start of that second half of the season where I thought this guy's going to be brilliant for us because he had energy, he had drive, he could shoot from distance, he could take players on, he was hardworking. It felt like he was going to be, I don't know, almost a perfect number 8, and that injury set him back. And obviously, the thing is, it was a huge, huge injury. But unfortunately, since then, and it was always going to be very difficult for him to recover from that because it wasn't even like a regular ACL. Apparently, it was much, much worse than that. And so it seems a bit harsh, but unfortunately, Ox hasn't really lived up to the billing that I didn't have initially, but that I kind of had for a short period of time, and then it all came crashing down.
I agree. When Ox signed, I was pleased because he does have that drive. You're quite right, and those goals in Champions League, especially against City, were a bit good, weren't they? And he picked up the injury against Roma, which, as you quite rightly say, was an absolute shocker, and he's done well to come back to the level he has. I always thought, looking at him, he was a typical Klopp player with lots of industry, would know when to make the runs and where to make the runs. It's a tough one for him, isn't it? It really is because we don't play in a way that suits him anymore. And I don't think it's fair to say we started the season saying, "Oh, maybe we'll try Ox in the false nine." That's just fan chat. That can't be a thing, can it? Do you think now, given what you've seen and where we're at and what we're looking to do, do you think we talked about it a little bit earlier? Do you think now is probably the time for Ox to be looking at his career and saying, I need to go and get game time at somewhere like West Ham or even Arsenal, as we spoke about before? Is this summer going to be the time when we say, sort of thanks very much, and he goes and starts a new chapter of his career? Can you see that happening?
Yeah, yeah, I think so. He's not getting much game time. He's been back for over a season now, or back, in as much as he has been back. And I wouldn't even necessarily be surprised if we can get a replacement in, whether it be on loan or permanently, if we see him go in January, because it's one of those things. Even if he does, it's not going to return to the same level that he could have potentially reached. It's better for him at this stage to be playing than be sat on Liverpool's bench. I don't think it's good for him. I don't think it's good for the club. I'm glad that we stuck by him. We gave him an extension to the contract when he was doing his rehab, gave him an extra year. But I think now it's probably best for all parties concerned that, we shake hands and wish each other luck.
Whilst I speak to Doug and then obviously give you my player that didn't achieve it for me, Rack and Dan, if you could be thinking of your favourite Klopp moment, something within the career that really resonates with you, that you look back and makes you laugh and you think of him very fondly. So, Doug, you've got to give me a player that didn't. Didn't or did it for you? Which one did you do last time?
I didn't do it for me last time.
Did do it for you this time, then, please.
It's got to be the obvious one, Mo Salah.
Yeah.
I mean, you buy a player from Roma who didn't do very well at Chelsea and then was put out on loan to Fiorentina. And you know what? It's just been an absolute masterstroke. £36 million just seems like an absolute bargain now. I mean, Salah's goal scoring record is just phenomenal. His goals per game ratio, his assists, his goal involvements. He's going to go down as one of our best ever players for the club as well. One of our best forwards at least as well. I just pray to goodness that we give him a new contract as soon as possible.
We will.
Because he's another one that's been really connected with the fans. He is enjoying his football. And that goal against City like 2 weeks ago, unbelievable finish. And he doesn't score simple goals either. It always seems to be made on his own individual brilliance. And I think the goal against Chelsea is still my favourite one. The one where Kepa's still trying to aim to get to that. So for me, it's Mo Salah.
Yeah, I think it's good section to talk about Mo Salah. I mean, he scored goals for Roma, but he certainly wasn't prolific. It's fair to say, isn't it, Dan, that if Mo Salah was clinical, he'd be given his Messi numbers, because you think like last season games against Newcastle, this season the draw with Brentford when he's only got the goalkeeper to beat. Against Newcastle, he puts it wide, and against Brentford, he scoops it over the crossbar. If he was clinical, we would be expecting 50 goals a season from him, wouldn't we?
Yeah, which is quite scary to think, really. But you're dead right. Like, listen, the man's outstanding, like absolutely outstanding, and his form at the minute is better than it's ever been, in my opinion. I spoke about this in the week on my own pod, and although his numbers in the first season were just ridiculous, he was almost like a surprise package to us and everyone else in the league at the time. I don't think anyone expected what he was doing. But now he's a much more mature, well-rounded footballer who scores all kinds of goals. Like, it felt like that first season he was just running behind people and people had no clue he was coming. And he was scoring a lot of his goals that way. But you touch on the City goal last week. I mean, that's different class. And then the Chelsea goal he scores a couple of seasons ago is an absolute worldie, and that's from 30-odd yards. So scary at the minute, quite frankly. But yeah, you're right. He does, if you're really going to be critical, he does miss chances. Probably one of the most glaring misses, I'd say, this season is when we should put the game to bed against Brentford. I think we're 3-2 up at the time. And he probably should make it 4-2, yeah. And he goes for what would have been a pretty audacious finish, but obviously gets it wrong. And in hindsight, we only draw the game. And we can, listen, if we're going to be critical of Salah, we've got very few or very little problems to worry about. But at the same time, he probably should score that.
I mean, it's not really, it's mad because of all of the good things he does. There is the one little thing that occasionally we go, Christ, I wish he'd finished that. It's not really a criticism. It kind of is what it is.
Yeah.
But you wouldn't swap him how he is now for anybody, would you, Rack, in terms of his conversion rate and you're right, Dan. Rack, you tell me a player is in better form in the world at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, at best, you're going to find players. People have talked a little bit about Lewandowski and Benzema. At absolute best, they're maybe on the same level, but what Mo's doing from a totally different position, and starting out wide and making those contributions in terms of goal scoring, but also general play. Like you quite often see him on the edge of our box, backing up Trent. And with the rotation that they're playing a lot now, where those three, where the 8, Salah and Trent rotate a little bit, there are times when Salah's actually having to cover the other two, and to still have that goal contribution rate and just general play. He's untouchable. I wouldn't swap him for anybody.
No, I wouldn't. I think he's been an absolute tremendous asset to the football club. I'm surprised it's taken as deep into this little section as it has for his name to come out, to be fair, because he's just ridiculous, isn't he? And, he's up for it this season, and he could well fire us to silverware. And certainly in Europe, teams don't know how to play against us in Europe. We are an absolute nightmare, especially if you play for Porto. You don't want to play Liverpool.
I just want to see, in that first season he was with us, there was a towards the end when he was really, really in his groove. I saw, the finish where the goalkeeper comes running out and he just dinks it over him, kind of like how he did to Alisson in that Roma game. When I start seeing that, then I think we're going to see Salah move on to an even higher level, because that's when he was in that season when he was probably the point where he'd scored like 25 goals or 30 goals, and he was just everything he touched went in.
Yeah.
So that's the last thing that I want to see. But yeah, that's really.
And he keeps himself in such great shape as well. And his physique's ridiculous. Looks like he's been hugged by Ted, that stupid thing on that film, with the claws around there and just below his armpits. There, I was reading about them. They are really, really hard to develop, those muscles there, and his are ridiculous. So I don't know if you saw the clip in the gym where he goes up the rope ladder thing. just using his hands, and he's about
Mm-hmm.
he must be 18 feet off the floor just using his hands. You know, if you're a coach there, you're thinking, you keep hold of that bloody rope, mate, because if you come off that, you're doing your ankle ligaments at best, aren't you? So, but hearts and mouths watching players of that ability do things like that. So, Rack, I'm going to come to you for your favourite Klopp moment in the 6 years we've had him. What's been your favourite moment?
I had the first one that sprung to mind. I'm going to give you two. The first one's a short one. It's just after we lost the European Cup final to Madrid later on that evening, where he was drunk with his German mates. I think they're from a rock and roll band in Germany, and they make up this song singing, "We saw the European Cup, Madrid had all the fucking luck. We will keep on being cool, bring it back to Liverpool." And it sounds a bit prophetic because obviously he did win it the following season, but when you think back to stuff like that, and because when he said it, we probably didn't think it was going to happen. It just does that's a special moment, and it's also kind of a bit of a fun moment. But really, for me, it all started from the press conference, and all they kind of catchphrases, when he calls himself the normal one, but the bit where he says we need to turn people from doubters to believers, I think is so important, and it really set the tone. Obviously, there's a lot of stuff that came after that, because you got to walk the walk. You can't just put these slogans out there. But I think that really changed, or put the idea in the mentality of the players and the fan base that we were doubters. Everyone had doubts. How far can we go? Have we got enough money? Are we going to buy the right players? All this kind of stuff. And Klopp came in, and to some extent, not completely, but to some extent, he made us all just calm down a little bit and say, "Don't worry, we'll get there."
I think that's a really, really good point you make, because as a fan base, excuse me, we were never could quite believe we were competing for things like league titles in 2014. We never really believed in ourselves. I don't think we could believe our luck that this crazy Uruguayan guy was driving the team in the direction they were going in. And I'm not anti-Brendan Rodgers, but I think Luis Suarez's impact has a bigger part to play than anything on that season. So I don't think we truly believed in ourselves then. What he's given us is this calm exterior that says, it's cool, it's how it is, and all that stuff. And he's really, when you see that, you don't stress, because he should be the most stressed man on the planet, but he really isn't. So it's kind of cool, and they're two good shouts. And I'm going to jump the queue because you've said my favourite one, which is the singing in the bar at 5 o'clock in the morning, and I'll tell you why. The song's brilliant, right? And his involvement in it's amazing, and I love him for it. But he's done this twice. The second time, I don't think the Liverpool players sang songs when they got to 97 points and didn't win the league. But what it shows is how philosophical the guy is. And what I mean by that is he's taken adversity of losing a European Cup final, and he's taken adversity of getting to 97 points and not winning the league, when we could have done a Spurs and disappeared up our own arse and blamed everybody but ourselves. And he's used that adversity to drive his players on, to give them a little bit more. And that is absolutely a special skill that maybe 2 or 3 people in world football have had or ever had.
Yeah.
Because he's not a sulker. He's not a crying arse. He got his head down. He went back to the players and said, "You got this close. You got this close in 2 different seasons. Give me 5% more, and I'll guarantee you we deliver." And what did the players do? They answered both of his rallying calls. So yes, it was amusing, and I love it. And I occasionally watch it, and it makes me laugh. But I think there's a bit more meaning to that than just singing in the bar. I think there's genuinely the persona of the man says, "I'll handle disappointment, and I'll make it in such a way that I'll use it to inspire me to do better." And that's an unbelievable quality for me. So I've jumped the queue because you called out the one I was going to say. So thanks for that, mate. Just wish you'd gone with the other one. We'll come to you then, Doug, for your favourite Klopp moments. You probably had it stolen by me and being Rack now, haven't you?
Yes. I think the Origi 90+6 goal. Oh, we're still on Dan's one.
You've stolen mine now, yeah. Carry on.
It's just a celebration. It's like, you don't know what's going to happen. Like when the ball comes off the bar, Pickford makes a meal of it, and then Origi scores, and then it's just it's just the commentary from Jamie Carragher. You could look at Jurgen Klopp basically on the pitch celebrating with Alisson. It was just amazing. But there's so many moments you could say as well. Another memorable one that I think many people won't remember.
Look at his face.
Careful
But-
now.
But is the game between Brentford and Liverpool? It was the moment with Thomas Frank and Jurgen Klopp where it's brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant. Thomas Frank just looks at Jurgen Klopp, smiles, and Klopp smiles as well, just to say what a good game, and then the embrace at the end. But yeah, it has to be the Everton game at Anfield.
Cool. Okay, Dan, pick your way through all the things we've said. I'm going to share one more with you very briefly at the end. I'm not going to steal your thunder, but
I could
knock yourself out, go on.
I could talk you through the Divock Origi goal again if you like. No,
Nope.
mine a very late call has just come to me and was post Champions League final win. The ensuing 6 minutes as Jurgen Klopp makes his way round every single person associated with Liverpool Football Club, and I challenge most Liverpool fans not to at least well up watching that, because that man that's done so much for us he's a mess in terms of his emotions, if we're honest. Him and Jordan Henderson in particular, I think, is probably the key one. Obviously, Jordan Henderson then goes and sees his father, which is ridiculous. But there's a Twitter video you've almost definitely all seen it. The focus is on Klopp for the few minutes after the final, and just sheer joy mixed with emotions is just an incredible watch. So again, hate to use that old phrase, but that pretty much sums up / epitomizes the man.
Do you know what, mate? That's a really, really good shout. And one thing that always sticks in my mind is the tenderness that he goes and commiserates with Son, human Son.
Yeah.
Because that's really heartfelt. That's not just like pat on the back, see you later, mate, hard luck. That there's genuine compassion in the way he is. And I said recently on the pod, you can only love your dad as much as you can only love your dad more than you love Kenny Dalglish. But I think Klopp's heading into that sort of era as well, isn't he, in terms of everything he's done for the club. The one I just kind of want to close this section on is, and it's funny because it's so fleeting. Do you remember when we lost to Southampton and Ralph Hasenhüttl threw himself on the floor and started crying? If you could ever see the look on Klopp's face, it's the only time I've ever seen Klopp's face where you can't see his teeth, because he's absolutely disgusted. It is the filthiest of filthy looks, and it's absolutely brilliant. So next time you see that, just check out Klopp's expression. But I think we've captured the spirit of the man and the sporting side of him and the compassion of him. And those are the things that when we spoke about earlier on, why he was a good fit for Liverpool. That's Liverpool. That's Liverpool. I mean, I'm a Scouser, you're a Scouser, Dan. That's our city to a T, isn't it? We're an emotional bunch at the best of times, aren't we? So, it's tremendous. So I just want to close the pod, guys, with a little chat on, and sorry, I'm going to take the mood down a little bit here. There will come a time when we don't have him. And obviously he's made that quite clear when that is supposed to be. But he did say to Builder, the newspaper, in the not too distant past, there is always a possibility that might not be the case. So we live in hope that he gets the project to a point where he thinks, I can't walk away from this, and he stays. But in the event he doesn't, Rack, who, if you had to pick one now, you knew it was going to come to light when he leaves. Where are we going with this? Where do Liverpool Football Club need to go to maintain the good work that Klopp's done and grow from it?
Look, I mean, I could get down just thinking about the idea of Jurgen Klopp leaving, to be honest, just because, it's just been such a great 6 years so far. Even last year when things weren't so great, we still had Klopp, and I'm grateful that we're going to have him for probably another 3 years, and then obviously we'll see. Who do I think will take over? I think we're going to kind of go back a little bit to the boot room era, and I think Pep Lijnders is the man that's been groomed to take over. I think one of the reasons I think you can see that that's the case just by the way that he takes press conferences now for stuff like the Carabao Cup, and and it's not the same. But when you hear him speak about football, and you hear it, you could argue it's a little bit Arteta, because when I've heard Arteta speak about football in the past before he became Arsenal manager, I thought, damn, this guy, the way that he speaks is inspiring. But I feel, that obviously probably is going to prove to be misplaced. But when you hear Pep speak about football, and the way that he talks about the identity of the club, and the identity of the team, and the things that he wants to see, and the young players that are coming through, and all these different factors, it seems to me that he's going to be the go-to guy. And a lot of people are going to be worried about that, justifiably so. But I think, is it a gamble worth taking? I would say so. But
Just
if
to play,
it fails, then obviously that's going to be a big problem.
just to play devil's advocate a little bit in that regard. Linders is clearly the go-to man for the players. So whilst Klopp loves him and they'll run through a wall for him, Ronnie Moran did a very similar job back in the day. There's always a guy that sits between the manager and the players that the players can go to and speak to about their problems. You look at the way we celebrated in the changing rooms after winning trophies. Linders was front and centre of all of that with the players. Is there a risk, just playing devil's advocate a little bit, that bond that he's got with the players makes being a manager slightly more difficult?
Yeah, look, I mean, it's legit concern. There's always that risk, and we just don't know until we walk down that path, and then we'll know how it goes. So, but it has worked for some clubs in the past where number twos have stepped up and become number ones. Obviously, at Liverpool more so than any other club probably. I don't think that's necessarily a path we're going to go down, thinking that, oh, it's happened in the past at Liverpool, we should try and go back to it. I just think that maybe they think Linders is the guy to maintain some continuity. We may have Michael Edwards leaving next summer, Klopp leaving within a couple of years. If you've got people in place who already know the club, know the players, know the structure, then there's less chance of there being a vacuum like there was at United, for example, where you had Edwards and Fergie leaving both at the same time, and there being basically a vacuum. So that's why I think Pep could be the guy that they plump for.
I wasn't discrediting your shout, by the way, mate, because that's
Yeah,
an
no,
obvious
it's
one
cool.
and a very good one. But occasionally, as a
It's
host, you've
a
got to
guess.
play devil's advocate. Yeah, but very well responded to, mate. Very eloquent indeed. Doug, coming to you, your thoughts on who might be a successor and who might not.
I like Rack's suggestion for Pep Linders, because I think Pep Linders speaks really, really well. I think he is sort of ready-made almost to be Klopp's successor, obviously when he does go. I mean, people obviously maybe say Stevie G as well, but like he hasn't really.
What a great comment that is.
Oh, thank
come
you.
on again, my friend. You can come on again.
Gerrard hasn't had a chance to sort of test himself yet. Yes, I know he's won the league at Rangers, but there's only certain sort of things he can do at Rangers that he can win. Maybe, like, people are saying that I don't know if he's going to get the Newcastle job. There's been talk that he's the current favourite for Newcastle, but there's been another report saying that apparently he doesn't want it. So, but I think 2024 might be a little bit too soon for Stevie G, especially if he hasn't tested himself in another league or somewhere like that. So I think Pep Linders to take over. I just don't want Steven Gerrard to have another Frank Lampard situation that he had at Chelsea, where he didn't do very well, and the fans kind of turned against him. I don't want that. I don't want Steven Gerrard to be turned against by the fans.
So the big difference there for me straight away is I'll give you two names: Jody Morris and Gary McAllister. And the reason why is when it went tits up for Frank at Chelsea, and he turned to his bench to say, because I've been a manager at semi-pro level, and you do need people around you to sort of, when you can't see it, to tell you what's going on. When he turned around and said to his bench, "Guys, help me out here," do you know what I mean? What's going on? What help me out here? Didn't get anything from them. Gary McAllister was fundamental in Steven Gerrard's development and progression as a professional footballer. So to have him as his sort of mentor, as a more seasoned, more experienced assistant manager, was a masterstroke. I think Guy McAllister's got a lot of miles on the clock. Has done everything properly. You can't play in a UEFA Cup final at nearly 37 years old if you haven't looked after yourself and you don't do the right things as a pro. So again, as I did with Rack, I think devil's advocate wise, I think Frank Lampard was very naive in not taking some experience in there. He could have even taken his uncle in there. Harry Redknapp would have gone in there and worked as his backroom staff and probably given him some very good advice. But it's easy to say that now as a football fan looking in on what happens. I'm not sure. You mentioned it. I'm not sure Newcastle's the right move for Gerrard. It could end up being a Chelsea, couldn't it? Where, irrespective of how well you do, the axe is permanently loaded above your head. The only surefire certainty of being a Chelsea manager is you're going to get sacked. That's it. And that's happened to everybody, irrespective of what they win. So it is an interesting shout, and I think the cynic in me says that Gerrard needs a lot more experience. The romanticist in me says that it's an obvious name that's going to come into the fray if it happens. And if you listen to him in an interview now, he's a very well-balanced manager and says all the right things at all the right times, and he's given Rangers an identity. And I think, Doug, you're more of a Scottish football fan than I am. I think it's pretty nailed on that they're going to make it 2 in a row over the course of a season. Their quality will do that for them.
100%, 100%. Because Celtic are absolutely nowhere near Rangers this season. I mean, I think Celtic are sitting 6th at the moment, and the game at the weekend is Rangers against Hearts, and that's first against second. It just kind of says that. I think if Rangers win, Rangers just need to continue what they're doing. Get out of Europe as soon as they can. I don't think they're going to go through a group of Lyon, Sparta, Prague, and the other name that rings off a bell. I can't actually think of who the other team is.
Leverkusen, was that last year?
That was last year.
Was it?
Funny enough, Celtic have got Leverkusen.
Celtic, that's what I'm thinking of. Yeah.
Aye. So get out of Europe as soon as possible. Maybe get a League Cup under your belts, because that's I think they play Hibs in the semis. So, win that, and then you've got a chance against Celtic. But the way I watch Celtic play at the moment, defensively they're an absolute shambles. And for me, if Rangers just continue on winning, I can't see anything past Rangers. So I think you're absolutely right, Steve. I think Rangers are going to make it 2 in a row.
And that would be the optimum time for Gerrard to make a move somewhere, wouldn't it, at the end of the second season? So he showed he wasn't a flash in the pan. The difficulty is he went invincible and a Centurion in the same season, mate. So he can't be invincible this year because they've already lost. It is possible they could be a Centurion for the second time, although it's unlikely. Because now they're a bigger draw and teams come out when Rangers turn up now, don't they, a bit more because they're champions. So, interesting points made there. Thanks for that, mate. And Dan, come to you. Obviously looking into the future. Any names to add to the list other than the 2 that have been discussed so far?
My pick would be Gerrard, with all the caveats that we've just spoke about, to be honest with you. I'd like him to get a Premier League job in the interim, to be honest with you. And that really pains me to say it for many reasons, because that means we're going to have to play against him. But at the same time, I think if it helps him become a better Liverpool manager, that needs to happen. Because I don't think coming off the back of however successful he is in Scotland really prepares him for the Premier League, with all due respect to what's going on up there. The only other name would be Julian Nagelsmann, just because I like what he's done at Leipzig, to be fair, previously. I just think he's done a good job there, and I've always been impressed by the way they develop players. Obviously, we've signed 2 of them. So, that would be my other shout. But if I'm honest, Gerrard's a dream, isn't he? 2024 is a few years away yet, so we don't know where he's going to be. But right now, God, I wouldn't take him. You know what I mean? But by that point, hopefully.
So Gerrard's audition for me is the remainder of this season and the next 2 seasons, to the point where Klopp does what Klopp wants to do. And then basically he's got we'll see this season as an opportunity to see if he can sustain success in Scotland, and then in the next 2 seasons he's got to go somewhere and sort of reinvent that football club and take them forward. And that's where the Newcastle thing could work in his favour in regards that, because they've got 2 seasons to spend as much money as they can before financial fair play kicks in. Because in the third season, basically, that's when the count starts. So if they want to spend £3 billion between now and in 2 years' time, that they can with no recourse. It's at the third season. There's a new ownership. They can have 2 years where they can spend what they want. It's because I can see you pulling faces, Rack. It's because they're new owners. They get 2 years to spend as much as they want before they come in under financial fair play. Because they've got to put their own identity and stamp on the club, and that's how. I think when financial fair play was brought into place, the club said, "What if we bring in new owners that have got much more money than the previous ones? Are you going to penalise us?" So they came up with this plan where you can have 2 seasons. So I think they're probably looking.
There's two kinds of financial fair plays though, because you have short-term cost control, which is basically financial fair play in the Premier League, and then there's UEFA FFP, which is the actual financial fair play that everyone talks about. That's been relaxed. But there hasn't really been any discussion about short-term cost control being changed. I know stuff like stadium spend and youth infrastructure spend and all that kind of stuff is outside the realms of FFP, but I haven't heard this 2 years amnesty or whatever they call it.
It's been done because what benefit is there for someone to take over a football club if they then can't put their money into the club to change the face of the club, to change the structure of the club, and to improve it? Because if you look
is that UEFA FFP? Is that UEFA FFP or the Premier League version?
I think it's UEFA, but because UEFA sits above the Premier League, they kind of have to go with it. Check it out. I mean, it's worth checking it out. But essentially, you wouldn't take a club on if you didn't think if you had £325 billion available to you, which is the number that's been banded around. How true that is or not, which is like 20 times more wealthy than Manchester City, which is a ridiculous thought, isn't it? Then there's got to be an opportunity for you to invest there and then at some point fall in line. Because if you thought about Newcastle's earnings now, they probably get to spend about £27.50, wouldn't they, in the transfer window? Because they're not a worldwide fan base. Their merchandising is the most money they spend is when all the fans take their shirts off and lose them and have to buy another one for the next week. That's probably where they get most of their revenue from. Go out. Have you been to Newcastle? Have you been up there?
A few times,
once, I went out there once.
Absolutely mental place, mate. That ground is about 25 foot away from about 25 pubs, mate. They get absolutely slaughtered before, during, and after the game, mate. What a brilliant place it is. I love it. So it'd be interesting. It could be a good move for Gerrard, going back to the point, to go in there and be given the controls of a football club with real sort of business measures to look at, where to spend. It would tell us a lot about his transfer acumen. If you were to give him money, where would he spend it? If he goes to Rangers and he goes and spends £50 million on Alfredo Morelos, you're thinking to yourself, okay, so we're not going to give him any money if he takes over at Liverpool, because that guy's like a loose cannon, isn't he? So lots of interesting things. Right, before we go, Dan, tell us where we can find you and what you've got coming up, and where anyone watching this now or retrospectively can follow you, please.
Yeah, so follow me on the Twitter. I'm working all the time for Read Liverpool, so catch me on there every single day. New stuff going out on there. Red's Unrestricted podcast as well. But yeah, the main thing is follow me on the Twitter, which is Dan_club, which is spelt that way, not the way you'd think.
Cool. Okay. Rack, where can we get you?
Twitter. That's my out of Twitter. Usually on the terrace every now and then. Do the Liverpool show with Niall on Let's Talk Premier League, and I haven't been on much recently, but normally Twitter Spaces. But yeah, last couple of weeks have been a bit crazy with work, so maybe around some point this week I'll pop into a space or two.
You can also sometimes find Rack on a Friday Rival show with me over on a friend of ours' channel.
I always bloody.
You always
sorry,
forget.
Steve.
If Usman gets teased this mate, he's coming for you, mate.
I'll get the sack.
Doug, where can we get you, pal?
Yeah, you can get me on my Twitter handle, which is right there, @Nod_992. You can get me on the Dugout Football channel on YouTube as well. You can get me on Instagram at Douglas.Horn and Facebook as Douglas James Horn.
There you go. A million places to find Doug. You can get me on my socials there. You can find me here on a Monday night with my usual suspects. And you can also find me occasionally on Eyes on the Ball TV on a Wednesday night with Daniel Bamaji and those guys, which is a really cool show. Failing that, come and watch this every Monday night because we've been doing this now 7 or 8 weeks, guys, and I don't think we've had a show yet where we've come away and thought that wasn't really cool. So big thanks as a host to you three tonight for bringing the content regards our boss Jurgen Klopp. I'd love to be able to say it'd be nice to sit here in 6 years' time and talk about him being here 12 years, but that's unlikely. But like you say, guys, 3 years is a long time away, and there's a lot of football to be played between now and then. So let's enjoy the ride. Heavy metal football. So thanks to everyone who came in the comments again. That's the energy that keeps us interested. The Beards comment was right up there with one of the best ever. Put it on again just because it warrants a second outing, doesn't it? That is absolutely the best thing. So thanks for the comments, and we'll see you next week on Monday night.